Straight Life by Art and Lori Pepper. This is episode 9 of Straight Life. In episode 8, Art began to learn the basics of jazz and started jamming with other jazz musicians. He left high school to go to San Diego and work for 3 months in Gus Arnheim's band. In this episode, he leaves Gus Arnheim's band, returns to LA, and starts playing on Central Avenue. Here's Art's narrative. Gus Arnheim was in a big ballroom down there. It was a very commercial band, and I didn't fit in because there were no jazz solos to play. You just read music. It was good practice, but it got tiresome. So I left, came back, went to Central Avenue again, and ran into Dexter Gordon. He said that Lee Young was forming a band to go into the Club Alabam. They needed an alto player. I auditioned, and I got the job. I think I auditioned at the colored union. They had a white union and a colored union. I had already joined the union when I lived in San Pedro. This was in the early 40s, and things were so different from the way they are now. Central Avenue was like Harlem was a long time ago. As soon as evening came, people would be out on the streets, and most of the people were black. But nobody was going around in black leather jackets with naturals, hating people. It was a beautiful time. It was a festive time. The women dressed up in frills and feathers and long earrings and hats with things hanging off them, fancy dresses with slits in the skirts, and they wore black silk stockings that were rolled in wedgie shoes. Most of the men wore big, wide-brimmed hats and zoot suits with wide collars, small cuffs, and large knees. And their coats were real long with padded shoulders. They wore flashy ties with diamond stick pins. They wore lots of jewelry, and you could smell powder and perfume everywhere. And as you walked down the street, you heard music coming out of every place, and everybody was happy. Everybody just loved everybody else, or if they didn't, I didn't know about it. Gerald Wiggins, the piano player, Slick Jones, the drummer, Dexter Gordon, and Charlie Mingus, we would just walk out in the street and pee off the curb. It was just cool. We'd light up a joint. We had Moda, which is moist and black, and we'd smoke pot right out in front of the club. The dope thing hadn't evolved into what it is now with all the police activity. I'd never heard of a narco, didn't know what the word meant. Nobody wanted to rat on anybody or plant their car with a joint or with some stuff. You didn't have to worry that the guy that asked you to go out and smoke a joint was a policeman, or that the chick that wanted to take you over to her pad and ball you was trying to set you up for the cops. People just got high and they had fun. And there were all kinds of places to go. And if you walked in with a horn, everyone would shout, "Yeah, great, get it out of the case and blow some." They didn't care if you played better than somebody else. Nobody was trying to cut anybody or take their job, so we'd get together and blow. There was no black power. I was 16, 17 years old, white, innocent, and I'd wander around all over the place at all hours of the night, all night long. And never once was accosted. I was never threatened. I was never challenged to a fight. I was never called a honky. And I never saw any violence at all, except for an occasional fight over a woman or something like that. It was a whole different trip than it got to be later on. The Club Alabam was the epitome of Central Avenue. It was right off 42nd Street, across from Ivy Anderson's Chicken Shack. There were a lot of other clubs, but the Club Alabam was really one of the old-time Showtime places. A huge room with beautiful drapes and silks and sparklers and colored lights turning and flashing. The bandstand was plush and gorgeous with curtains that glistened. The waitresses were dressed in scanty costumes, and they were all smiling and wiggling and walking around. And everywhere you looked, you saw teeth, people laughing, and everybody was decked out. It was a sea of opulence, big hats and white fluffy fur. And the cars out front were real long Cadillacs with little mud guards, little flappy little things, shiny things. The band had 2 altos, 2 trumpets, a tenor, and a rhythm section. On the show was Avery Parrish. He's the one who wrote After Hours and made that famous. And when he played, the whole place rocked with the music. There was Wynonie Harris, a real handsome guy, light-skinned with glistening eyes and the processed hair, all shiny with every hair, just perfectly in place. He had a good blues voice and just carried the audience away. The walls would start shaking, the people screaming and clapping. Every now and then they'd get up and start wiggling in the aisles next to their tables. Moke and Poke were on the bill, far-out comedians. When they came on, they'd do this walking step, laughing, one right behind the other, in perfect synchronization. After their act, they'd run into their dressing room, rip off their clothes, and throw on silk robes and come back and do this walk around the audience. Every now and then, when they were walking, if the audience was really good, they'd have it so their joints would flop out of their robes, flopping in time, in perfect unison. And the chicks would go, ah! And we'd just be shouting in the background, playing these real down-home blues. I'd go in there and play and get so caught up in the feeling that I never had a chance to think about anything bad that might be happening to me or to worry at all. It was such an open, such a free, and such a beautifully right time. There was a place on Vernon, right around the corner from the Club Alabam, called the Ritz Club. You went through a door into an empty storefront and walked through a curtain. You took bottles in, and they served mixes and food. The music started at 2 a.m. and went on all night. People would come and sit in. Jimmy Blanton, probably the best bass player that ever lived. He was so far ahead of any jazz musician on any instrument, it was just ridiculous. Art Tatum came in, Louis Armstrong, Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins, Roy Eldridge, Johnny Hodges, Lester Young. You can imagine what a thrill it was to be in the same room with these people. I used to go sit in after my job at the Club Alabam and play with them. Then the management decided to hire a regular band at the Ritz Club, so they'd always have somebody there to play when people came to sit in, and I was hired. That's when I started smoking pot. I was already drinking every night and taking pills. I was hanging around with Dexter Gordon. We smoked pot and took Dexedrine tablets, and they had inhalers in those days that had little yellow strips of paper in them that said poison. So we'd put these strips in our mouths behind our teeth. They really got you roaring as an upper. Your scalp would tingle and you'd get chills all over, and then it would center in your head and start ringing around. You'd feel as if your whole head was lifting off. I was getting pretty crazy, and right about that time, I think, Dexter started using smack, heroin. Dexter Gordon was an idol around Central Avenue. He was tall. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that made him seem like he was about 7 feet tall. He had a stoop to his walk and wore long zoot suits. And he carried his tenor in a sack under his arm. He had these heavy-lidded eyes. He always looked loaded, always had a little half smile on his face. And everybody loved him. All the black cats and chicks would say, "Hey, Dex," and pat him on the back and bullshit with him. I used to stand around and marvel at the way they talked, having really nothing to say. They were able to play these little verbal games back and forth. I envied it, but I was too self-conscious to do it. What I wouldn't give to just jump in and say those things. I could when I was joking to myself, raving to myself in front of the mirror at home. But when it came time to do it with people, I couldn't. Lee Young was worried about me. I was so young, I think he felt he had an obligation to take care of me. Lee looked like the typical black musician of the 40s, the hep black man with the processed hair. He was light-complected, very sharp with diamond rings. He wore his clothes well, and he was a cat you'd figure could conduct himself in any situation. His brother was Lester Young, one of the greatest saxophone players that ever lived in this world. The most fantastic, equaled only fairly recently by John Coltrane. Better than Charlie Parker. In my humble opinion, better than Charlie Parker. Just marvelous. Such beauty. And Lee played nice drums. He was capable, but was in the shadow of his brother, and I think he felt that. He loved his brother and was very proud of him, but I don't see how he could help but feel sad that he couldn't have played with his brother and really set the world on fire. Lee was very nice to me and thoughtful. To show you what kind of a person he was, I was playing my parts and nobody else would have worried about me. Why go out of their way to worry about a little white boy, you know? But Lee dug that I was hanging out with Dexter and we were on that road. And he sat down with me. He said, "I've talked to Dexter, man, and he's got a way to go. There's cold, awful dues he's got to pay. And he's just going to have to pay him, I'm afraid. But you, man, why don't you... Boy, I'd love to see you not have to pay those dues." I said, "No, I'm all right. I'm okay." He said, "Art, I really like you. I'd sure love to see you do right." At that time, Jimmy Lunsford's band lost Willie Smith, who had played lead alto with them for a long time. He went with Harry James. So Kurt Bradford, who had been with Benny Carter, went to Jimmy Lunsford. And Lee got me an audition with Benny. He tried to get me a job where he thought I'd be protected. I auditioned, and I made the band.